Thank you very much. I'm Nick Campion. I'm Director of the Sophia Centre for the Study of Cosmology in Culture and Senior Lecturer in Archaeology, History and Anthropology at the University of Wales, Trinity St David's. So welcome to the conference on Heavenly Discourses. We are here celebrating the 50th anniversary of human spaceflight, and the title of the conference is Astronomy, Myth and Culture. So we have a huge diversity of presentations, as you will see. Now, just before I begin, we've been very privileged to have a letter of greetings from 3 Russian cosmonauts, which I'm going to read out. The team of cosmonauts of the Yuri Gagarin Russian State Scientific Research and Experiential Cosmonaut Training Center, Zvezny Gorodok, Russia, cordially welcome the participants of the scientific conference Heavenly Discourses, which takes place in Bristol, Great Britain, 14th to 16th of October 2011, in the year of the 50th anniversary of the first human flight in outer space. The world changed forever when Yuri Gagarin, having overcome terrestrial gravitation, made a heroic flight in space on the 12th of April 1961, and we are glad that you conduct this conference in honor of this grandiose achievement. We wish all participants of the conference creative success, health, optimism and good spirit. We are sure that the conference will be successful and will become an important step into understanding the relationship between humanity and cosmos and the place of humanity in the universe. Signed, Vladimir Shibelev, the chief of the Yuri Gagarin Russian State Scientific Research and Experiential Cosmonaut Training Center, hero of the Russian Federation, Yuri Lonkachov, commander of the team of cosmonauts, the Yuri Gagarin Russian State Center, and Nikolai Yumanov, trainer of Russia and doctor of psychology. So, on straight away with my presentation. The space race, myths, contexts and consequences, 1961 to 2011. Well, I think even this year there have been some changes in the dynamic, the global context of the space race, the importance of which may only become apparent in years to come, and that is that the United States has again significantly withdrawn from the realm of human spaceflight, abdicating it to private commercial ventures. Meanwhile, the Chinese are pressing ahead with their own plans to launch a space station. So the geopolitical context of our exploration of space has actually decisively shifted. So here's a picture of Yuri Gagarin in the Time magazine from 1961, the hero astronaut gazing into space. Well, like a spaceship itself, a hammer and sickle flies past. Now I'm going to begin with a quote from Claudius Ptolemy from the 2nd century BC. Ptolemy, the 2nd century astronomer and geographer, a man, though, with much wider metaphysical interests than that simple designation would suggest. He wrote, "I know that I am mortal, the creature of one day, but when I explore the winding course of the stars, I no longer touch with my feet the earth. I'm standing near Zeus himself, drinking my fill of ambrosia, the food of the gods." So let's deal with approaches to the history of space flight. We have objective truth, which might deal with technology, budgets, finances, celestial mechanics, how we actually get to the planets, and narrative truth, ideological and cultural contexts, propaganda, film, conspiracy theorists, New Age and new religious movements, and cultural consequences. Amongst the consequences, of course, it's generally well accepted that the first photographs taken of the entire Earth from space by the Apollo astronauts in the late 60s were responsible for galvanizing the notion of the global village, of an Earth without borders, without frontiers, one race, the human race. So, the historiography of the space race. The Jet Propulsion Laboratory in California is coming up to its 75th anniversary, and there's an objective truth being celebrated here. The actual fact that it is now 75 years since the first rocket experiments. But there's a narrative truth as well. to do with Frank Malina, who was one of the prime movers in this venture. And the press release put out by the Jet Propulsion Laboratory tells us that concerning the TV program they're making, says the 90-minute episode takes viewers on a journey through Malina's life using personal letters, drawings and paintings to reveal an extraordinary story of how the Jet Propulsion Laboratory came to be. It goes on, this is a very personal story about a person few even know, revealing the reasons why he has been forgotten. The time is long since past that the public should know the name Frank Malina. So there's the building up of the hero scientist here, of a man who may have been a rocket engineer, but he was complex, he was an artist, he had deep, secret, hidden motivations which can only now come to light. I also want to reference the sociologist Max Weber and his concept of technical rationality as opposed to value rationality. And what I'm really concerned with here is value rationality. What value do we put on space exploration? How does it express our values? Well, let's look at the context. The space race in its origins in the 1940s and 50s is often placed within the context of the Cold War, and political analysis in everyday discourse tends to be dominated by material considerations. So the Cold War tends to be analysed in terms of competition for resources, strategic control, competing economic models. Psychological considerations tend to be emphasised less, perhaps because they are more difficult to measure. So if, though, we look at psychological motives, the Cold War then becomes analysed in terms of greed, fear, jealousy, anger, and concepts such as otherness. The Soviet Union is the other of the United States. It's the dark empire. The United States is the other of the Soviet Union, the home of exploitative, evil capitalists. So the space race is often interpreted as a battle. So Deborah Cadbury, in her History of the Space Race, subtitles her book, The Battle to Rule the Heavens. There's a struggle to rule the heavens. We're almost anticipating the military antics of the Star Wars films. Now, I also want to look at President John F. Kennedy's speech to Congress of the 25th of May 1961. This was the speech in which Kennedy put forward the plan to place a man, as he put it, on the moon, stung by the humiliation which the United States experienced as a result of Yuri Gagarin's flight just 1 month earlier. Kennedy dealt with the objective and the rational. He said, "We propose to accelerate the development of the appropriate lunar spacecraft. We propose to develop alternative liquid and solid fuel boosters. And we will propose additional funds for other engine development." There's the technical side, side of the space race. But he also said, "Finally, if we are to win the battle that is now going on around the world between freedom and tyranny, the dramatic achievements in space which occurred in recent weeks should have made clear to all of us, as did the Sputnik in 1957, the impact of this adventure on the minds of men everywhere, who are attempting to make a determination of which road they should take. Now it is time to take longer strides, time for a great new American enterprise, time for this nation to take a clearly leading role in space achievement, which in many ways may hold the key to our future on Earth." So it's time for choice. It's time for everybody to make a decision. It's time to choose between freedom and tyranny. And that choice can be made through the placing of a man on the moon, through a triumph of the American enterprise. So we can also look at the Soviet dream, the Soviet cosmic utopia. There are a group of people in Russia and the Soviet Union in the early 20th century who we refer to as cosmists, who argued that the next stage of human evolution is in space. We may wonder what Karl Marx would have thought of this. I suspect he would have approved. One such figure was Konstantin Tsiolkovsky, who said, "Mankind will not be bound to Earth forever." Tsiolkovsky was a rocket engineer, an enthusiastic reader of Jules Verne, He was hailed by the Soviet government as an ordinary person who had become a great scientist when freed from the oppression of the bourgeoisie. And we have here an image not just of Tsiolkovsky, but of a heroic Russian family looking slightly upwards, almost envisaging this new cosmic dream. So my hypothesis then is, and I don't think it's a controversial one, in the narrative sense, in the sense of narrative history, space exploration is a psychological enterprise. And we could point to Carl Jung, Sigmund Freud, or B.F. Skinner, I think, in our support. I don't think any of them would challenge this notion. So technology is an adjunct to the psychological imperative, and scientific discoveries serve psychological needs. We could equally well say that the space race is a religious enterprise, a mythical enterprise, a desire for salvation parallel to the acquisitive functions of consumerism, or anything else. It's the great feature of cultural theory that it's flexible, it's malleable. We can come up with different terms to encourage a conversation to discuss any great enterprise. So looking at the ascent to the stars then, we can go back to the 2nd millennium BC, to the Egyptian pyramid texts written to encourage the pharaoh's journey to the stars. This is one such text, utterance 508. I have trodden thy rays as a ramp under my feet, whereupon I mount up to that my mother, the living Uraeus on the brow of Re. The Uraeus is the cobra that the pharaohs wore on their heads, and the pharaoh is mounting to the sun, to Re, the sun god. It's generally assumed that in terms of recorded history, the literary tradition, the ancient Egyptians were the first to espouse the notion of an ascent of the soul to the stars. There may have been earlier oral traditions who held the same belief, but unfortunately they're lost. In the literary record, it's the Egyptians. And I would hold with the Greek historian Herodotus that these ideas then were adopted by the classical Greeks. So the Greeks in Egypt in the Hellenistic period produced a series of texts known collectively as the Corpus Hermeticum, which dealt with the soul's ascent to the stars. In a purgative sense, the soul is purified by ascending to the stars. So here's one such text from around the 2nd or 1st centuries BC. I'll paraphrase, that as the soul passes the moon, it sheds the perils of growth and decay. As it passes through the sphere of Mercury, it sheds trickery. As it passes past Venus, it sheds the tendency to deceit. At the Sun, it sheds the negative qualities of being a ruler. At Mars, it abandons daring and recklessness, Jupiter greed, and at Saturn, it sheds falsehood. And at the 8th sphere, that of the stars, the soul begins to praise God. It hears voices from beyond the stars also praising God, and it sings louder. And as it ascends, it becomes one with God. It unites with God. Humanity and the divine are reconciled.